Hello, welcome to a new video. In this video, we are going to learn how we can configure Tomcat to support HTTPS, i.e. SSL, so that we can use a secure mode to connect to the Tomcat. In this case, what we're going to do is basically 3 steps. The first step will allow us to generate a self-signed certificate. Obviously, in the real world, when I am working in a company, what I am going to do is use a certificate that has been authorized by a reliable company and that therefore I can use within my company, for example, a certificate that corresponds to the name of my company. But for this video, we're going to use a self-signed certificate that's going to allow us to do the secure configuration test inside Tomcat. Then we will see that we have to modify the XML server, that is, the Tomcat configuration file, where we will see how we can activate SSL and point to the certificate that we have created in the previous step. And of course, we will have to stop and start Tomcat, since for this configuration to work we will have to bounce the server. Well, first of all, to generate a self-signed certificate, we can use the keytool. Keytool is a tool that comes with the Java JDKs, and therefore we do not have to download any other product to be able to generate a self-signed certificate, although there are many on the market. I don't want to go into each of these options that are multiple and varied, but let's say that the most important thing is that in the end it will generate a file with this name, keystore p12. Of course, you can put whatever name you want. I'm going to leave this one, which is the one I'm going to use later to make the configuration in the XML server file, but we can say that all these properties will allow us to create a self-signed certificate that I can use to do tests and other types of configurations in the course or wherever you are working. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this entire line to launch it inside my operating system. I go back to command line. One important thing I'm going to do is leave this self-signed certificate file in Tomcat's configuration directory. That is, in this case, I am located inside that directory, and what I want to achieve when I paste and execute the keytool command is that it generates the file inside. Actually, I can put it anywhere, but hey, it's a good practice to leave it in the configuration directory of the Tomcat itself. So, if I launch this command, it will ask me different options. For example, what is the name of the organization? Well, I'm going to put test here. I'm going to put it all as a test because in reality what I'm doing is a small test and therefore it doesn't make much sense to put it in another way. We are going to put here the city, the province, in my case Madrid. In my case it is because it is from Spain, the country code, and here I am going to tell you that ES, and this should have generated the file for me without any problem. If I run the command ls-l, I should have generated a little file here called keystore p12, which is where that self-signed certificate is going to be saved. Okay, what's the next step I need to take? The next step I have to take is to edit the XML server file and configure the SSL block so that it is active, because by default it is disabled and therefore it would not work. So, if I enter the server XML file that is inside the conf directory, down here I must have a block that is commented and that corresponds precisely to the connection in safe mode. If we go down here, you can see that the block would be here, where it says define an SSL, TLS, HTTP connector, and as we can see, in this part that is where the connector is, it says port 8443, which is the default port at the secure level of Tomcat. We see that it is commented on. What I need to do is delete this comment line and this comment line down here to uncomment the configuration block. I'm not going to go into too much detail about the properties of this configuration because the only thing I want is, as I said, to activate SSL. These properties indicate, among other things, the protocol, the maximum number of threads, we tell you that SSL enable equals true, etc. A very important property is this one that says certificate key store file, which is telling us where that self-signed certificate is stored, which as you can see is in the conf directory. By default it puts this name, but I have to change it and I have to use the one I put before, which is keystore p12, that is, I have to put the same file name that I have used before. Then we indicate the password which, as you can see here, is changeit. I'm going to go back to the command so you can see that I've put this password on it. If I go back to the site where I had the command prepared, we can see that here the storepass option, which is changeit, the same one that I just put inside the settings in Tomcat. If I go back to the configuration file, I can check that I have entered this password. Of course, if you have set your own password, you just have to make that change in the configuration and indicate what the password is. Well, once I've modified this, I get out of the file. Once I've recorded it, all that's left is to start and stop Tomcat. So, if we go to the bin directory, all I have to do is Catalina stop to stop the server, and as always, I run Catalina run to restart it. If everything is correct, in one of the lines that appears here you must inform us that you have activated the SSL mode. I can see that it appears in these lines. We see that it is telling us that it is using port 8843, the associated certificate, the type of certificate we have created, the configuration file of the certificate we are using, etc. At first it seems that it has worked correctly and that it has configured the Tomcat to work in safe mode. To do one last test, we can enter the Tomcat manager to check if this is indeed the case. To do this, we go to the manager, and within the manager we go to the server status option. Within server status, if everything is correct, we go down a little bit, and I can check that I have a block with HTTPS-SSL Neo 8443, that is, by default I can check that I actually have it active. No information appears because I have not sent anything through this port, through this protocol, but we see that it tells me the maximum number of threads, the threads present, the current ones that are occupied, the bytes that are using, etc. In other words, by default we can say that the HTTPS has indeed been configured correctly within this Tomcat server. I agree? Well, nothing. I hope it has been clear to you, and see you in the next video.